So today I'm going to be talking on a subject matter that has been more or less a recurring theme um, of most of my podcasts. So if you listen to the podcast a lot, what you realize is that I talk about this subject matter a great deal. I would say about 60% of my podcast is recently has been themed around a need to rest and not to push. And if you're someone that is very conversant with the podcast, if you scroll down to the very first podcast I've put out there, I think it's titled, Are You Running a Business or Are You Running a Hustle? And for those that know what my mind has been in terms of my value system, a lot of people would know that I am very anti hustle. I'm very anti push, and I'm more camped in the zone of flow and rest and peace. And today I want to further buttress this mindset that I have about not living a life of hustle, a life of hustle, a life of tussle, and a life of struggle, a life of haste, a life of speed, a life of strategy. Um, I don't think it's the most effective way to live. And I don't think we'll get the best out of life if we had this disposition towards life. However, I'm very aware of the fact that these things I've said, this hustle culture, this go out and get it culture, this strategy mindset is very strongly propagated in today's world. And so when people hear me say things like this, I know that I can sound a bit passive. I know that I can sound a bit unambitious. In fact, unambitious is putting it mildly. I can sound like a no future ambition type kind of person. And I can imagine that there are some people that will say, oh, I shouldn't be listening to this right now. This is too passive. This is just allowing life happen to you. And this is what I want to talk about. We spent a great deal of our lives trying to make things happen, trying to make good things happen to us. A lot of us spend a great deal, most people, of our lives trying to orchestrate good things. We try to orchestrate favorable outcomes. We spend a lot of our lives strategizing how to make good things happen. But I want to have you know that the best things in your life are not things you would orchestrate. Some of the best things that would ever happen to you will happen to you. And what I mean by this is that life is sweetest when this happens to us. I'll say that again. Life is sweetest when it happens to us. The best things that would experience in our lives while we are here would happen to us. They would not be things that we made happen. They will be things that we didn't see coming. So to put it in a more direct way, when the best things that would happen to you, you will not be the orchestrator. You will be more or less the victim or the receiver. A victim is too negative a word. But that's how I see it in my mind. When you are helpless and so uninvolved in this good acts, these good things. You'll be so uninvolved. They would happen to you. This is what I've come to realize about life. It's very, yeah, it's very common for people to try to make good things happen. And when they try to make good things happen, the best they receive are good things. But what most people receive are average things. That's why we have this saying, you aim for the moon, but you end up with the stars. Or aim for the stars and end up with the moon. But the saying just goes in a way whereby you aim for higher, but if that doesn't happen, you end up with something at least average. And this is what happens a lot in life. When we try to make good things happen, at best, good things will happen. But normally, average things happen. I want to have you know that the best things in life happen to us. We do not orchestrate them. We are receivers of them. And a lot of times I have to remind myself, Tola, think back on your life. A lot of the things that you hold precious, those precious memories, those things that have been sweetest in your life, have not been the things that you struggle to get. They have been the things that just happen to come to you. And you look at it and you're like, how am I here? I'm a total victim of this circumstance. This thing is happening to me right now. I cannot claim to have a hand in it. And if you're listening to this podcast right now, I want you to think back on your life. And you realize that a lot of the things that you're grateful for, that have amazed you, have just happened to you. And if you can't think of too many things, it means that you are too involved. You're somebody that doesn't rest enough. You're too involved. And that's why when you look back on your life, you can't really think of really incredible things that have happened without your involvement. And if you're such a person, I pray that God grants you the grace to let go. To let go. You see, the best state for us as human beings is not to be or to have a positive mindset. It's not a positive go-getting mindset. A lot of people advocate positivity for us as human beings. Have a positive mindset, confess positive things, think positively. I want to say that this is a very difficult thing for the human being to do. Positivity doesn't come naturally to the human being. Positivity is very hard. The human being has a higher tendency for the negative than he or she has for the positive. It's incredibly hard for a human being to stay in positive energy. Very hard. So someone might confess positive, but their minds would always gravitate towards negativity. It's a conscious action for the human being to drag the mind out of negativity towards positivity. But it seems like a very easy thing for the human mind to slide to negativity. We have to be conscious about positivity, but negativity, a lot of times, just seems to be a default state of the human being. And I've wondered for a long time, why? The most positive person you meet, I can guarantee you, the most positive person you meet is still more negative than positive. The person is just more positive than the average person. So what I mean is that the most positive person you know out there, that oh, this guy is such a positive person, or this lady is just a positive person, that person is probably 40% positive and 60% negative. When the average human being, a lot of times, 80 to 90% negative and 10% or 20% at best positive. So even the most positive still has more negativity in them. Why is the human being easily negative in their mind? Why is it so easy to think negative thoughts and we have to be conscious about positivity? I'll tell you why. Because the human being is rational and logical. The human being is rational and logical. The normal human being, the sane human being, is rational and logical. This is our biggest challenge as human beings. And this is what pulls us towards negativity rather than positivity. And you might ask, how does logic and rationality pull us towards negativity? Because what it means to be rational and logical is that you operate with four words. Four words is what defines us as rational and logical. That is, these four words is what makes us higher than every other animal out there in nature. These four words. And this is what it means when they say the human being is logical and rational. It's because the human being still lives under the umbrella of these four words. And these four words are what, when, why, and how. What, when, why, and how. These are the four words that constrains the human being to being logical beings. Once you stop asking yourself these four words, you are no longer a rational human being. What, when, why, and how. There is no other living creature out there that concerns itself with all these four words. There might be some that have some intelligence that might operate in the zone of maybe one or two. What and how. But most of them are ignorant of these four words. The human being is the only one that is saddled with these four words that make up logic and rationality. And this is what makes us negative in our emotions, in our disposition. Do you know why these four words draws us to the negative? Because when we do not have an answer for what, or an answer for when, or an answer for why, or an answer for how, the human being goes into a state called confusion. When a human being doesn't have answers, he becomes confused. So when we do not have answers to what, when, why, and how, our minds goes into a state of chaos called confusion. This state of chaos leads us to a state of doubt. Confusion leads to doubt. Doubt means uncertainty. Doubt means we do not know where we stand. And doubt leads to fear and insecurity. And fear and insecurity is the height of negativity. So because we ask ourselves these questions, what, when, why, and how, we have a tendency not to have answers to all or some of these questions. And so we have a tendency to live in confusion, which grows into doubt, which grows into fear and insecurity. Our rationality stops us from being positive. And when we slide into the negative, we cannot attract the good things of life anymore. And then good things don't happen. So, what I'm trying to say is that on a good day, the living being, whether plants or animals, are meant to attract goodness. But most living beings are able to attract goodness because they do not saddle themselves with these four questions: what, when, why, and how. So good things. So they do not live in the negative. They do not live in fear. They do not live in discouragement. They do not live in doubt. They do not live in confusion. And that's why you wonder, animals that live in the jungle, as harsh as the jungle is, you don't see them living in constant fear. That's why you can see them drinking from the river where another animal was eaten by a crocodile just some days ago, and they will drink peacefully. Have you ever seen a chicken or a cow or a goat or a dog or something like that that was trying to cross the road? Mostly chickens. The other day I was looking at a chicken and it almost got run over by a car. And for a brief moment, it was just fluttered its wings and was in some chaos, and then was able to escape the car. And in less than a minute, it was back to pecking on the floor for food like nothing ever happened. Back to being in a stable way. It didn't need to take a break and for people to fan it to get itself back into the swing. It just went ahead with life like nothing ever happened. And I looked at this chicken and I said, how is it able to regulate itself back to this thing after a near-death experience? Because a chicken doesn't ask why this just happened or how it just escaped death or when next this thing can happen or what it was that was about to eat it or kill it or run over it. When a zebra escapes a lion that had its paws and its teeth on the limbs and it was just able to escape, you see that same zebra few minutes later grazing with the herd, not living in trauma, because they do not live under the burden of logic. When, what, why, and how. We do not understand that the tree of knowledge that was told, that we are told about in the Garden of Eden, signifies these four things. When are we going to become like God? How are we going to become smarter? What really are we? And how will God take care of us? This was the fall of man. And that is the fall we have been dealing with ever since. And this is why good things do not happen to us anymore. This is why man is now left in a state of having to till the ground and thinking, when will this thing grow? How will it grow? How do we cook it? How will it taste? Man never was made to deal with that burden. But that was the fall when we began to have knowledge. Animals do not live in this kind of burden, under this kind of burden. But we as men do. We as human beings do. This is the burden. This is the burden that we deal with. I remember watching a documentary some time ago, and the documentary was quite interesting. It was a documentary about some people that followed a tiger. I think it was a tiger, no, a lion. It was a lion or a lioness. It was a big cat. And at the beginning of the documentary, The big cat had a fight, had just come out of a fight or a tussle with either was a horned animal. Like, I don't really know what it was. Maybe it was a wildebeest or something like that. And that animal had injured it, maybe a buffalo or something, had injured the lion on the face. It was a deep gash. A deep gash. And so they decided to follow this, to check up on this lion, to see how it will do and when it will die from infection of this terrible cut across the face. Almost lost his eye. And 1 year later, they spotted the lion back to full health. No antibiotics, no clinic, no nothing, just a scar that had healed. The scar was still very visible, but the lion was back to hunting normally. It had not lost its sight. It had not lost its life. It had healed. And there are a lot of cases like this. When you look at animals, they heal without any medical attention. And that's because they live in a state of conscious sleep. And what does this mean? It's a state of letting life happen. It's a state of a lack of tussle. It's a state of a lack of worry. It's a state of not asking, when will this wound heal? How will it heal? How injured am I? And why did I suffer this injury? Because they are not feeding that injury with the negativity of logic, what happens is that they stay in what I would call a passive state of positivity. And before you know it, they get better. The human being doesn't know how to stay in a passive state of positivity, because the human being is saddled with logic that throws us into a place of panic and tells us we have to start acting. And then we begin to act and go from pillar to post. And that's why you see some human beings go from pillar to post and still lose everything. It seems like things just get worse because we do not allow that positive flow of energy to come into our lives. So I'll say this. The best state for us is not a positive mindset, because a positive mindset is very hard for a human being. People can tell you, confess positive, confess positive, confess positive. What you realize is that you live in a life of struggle. By the time you confess positive, give it a while, your mind will begin to slide back to the negative again. How? When? Why? When will God do this? Why did God allow this to happen? What is going on around me? And before you know it, you start trying to answer questions. And for every day and every time you do not have an answer, you get into confusion, which leads you into doubt, which leads you into fear. So I would say this: the best state, the state we must strive to be in, is a state of passive positivity. This is almost a sleep state. The closest thing to it is when we sleep at night. A lot of us don't understand that this thing called sleep, we think it is to refresh our bodies, to get rest. Yes, it's true, we can, but we didn't need it. To be honest with you, man didn't need to rest. You understand? God can do it that we don't have to rest. It's not about rest. The real jewel of sleep is to allow God work. The real essence of sleep is to allow God to work through his positive energy without the interference of our minds. The first mention of sleep in the Bible was when God wanted to work on Adam. It wasn't because Adam needed to rest. God realized that our minds on a good day has a way of tussling and struggling. So a lot of times I tell people this: God enjoys us sleeping because for the first time in the day, He can do His work without interruption of our troublesome minds, without the negativity that comes from the energy of our mind asking ourselves logical questions. Some of you have ever wondered that you have this rash or this irritation or maybe a cut or maybe a stomach ache or something, and you go to bed and the next day you feel better. You don't understand why you feel better the next day. You go to sleep and you feel slightly better. Some of you totally better. Because in that sleep state, you were in a place of passivity. Positive passivity. You were positively passive. You were not thinking. You were not burdened by the 4 questions: what, when, why, how. For the first time in your day, you were surrendered. And then positive, good energy started to flow towards you, to every area of your life that needs a touch of God, without hindrance. A lot of you, that's why you wake up the next day feeling better. It wasn't the drugs you took, some of you. Some of you don't even take any drugs and just realize you feel better. I remember I had this rash on the back of my neck some time ago, and I was so worried about it during the day. Kept on touching and scratching and saying, oh, what's it? And every time I worried about it, I was sending negative energy to it. So it began to itch. It began to itch. And I started feeling uncomfortable. And something told me, Tola, you need to stop sending negative energy towards that thing. And I thought to myself, what's the negative energy? The thing that you are thinking about. When will it go? Why do I have it? What is it? How will it go? What do I need to do? Have I used enough? Should I use it 3 times a day? And I start having strange imaginations. But I realized that when I went to bed, woke up the next day, the rashes are diminished significantly. The next day again, diminished significantly. And I realized, why is it always when I go to bed? Because I'm surrendered at that point. Good things happen to us. In fact, I would say the best things happen to us when we are distracted from it. Not when we are trying to be positive about it. To be positive is a good thing, but it's an incredibly hard thing for you as a human being. A lot of times what you need to do is to take your mind away from it. You need to become occupied with something else. That's why a lot of us will realize there are some people, money is not their problem. You'd realize that a lot of people that don't prioritize money, they're the ones that money flow towards the most. They don't prioritize it. They don't worry about money. They are distracted from it, and it seems like if money follows them everywhere. But some people, their minds are always on, how do I make? How do I make? Those people, when they make money, it leaves their hand very easily. The money never satisfies. Good things or the best things happen when we are in a state of passive positivity. You know, some days ago, I was at home about evening, and I decided to check on my Telegram community. And I realized that there were about 50 people that had joined. Now that was interesting to me, because I realized that I get this kind of influx when I go and speak somewhere. And maybe when I speak, I tell them, oh, I have a community on Telegram, and I give them the link, and then people join. But a lot of times they don't, not up to 50 will join, maybe about 20, 15, 20 will join. But this time I looked, it was like about 50. But then I just thought, okay, maybe some people just shared it or stuff like that and stuff like that. I didn't give too much attention to it. And then my wife came to me and said, have you seen the people that have joined the Telegram group? I said, yeah, I saw it's about 50. She said, no, it's not about 50. She said, they're about 100 now. I said, I just checked this thing like how many minutes ago? They were about 50, 100. And I checked 100. And while I was checking, two more people joined. And I was thinking, what's going on? My wife said, maybe somebody's talking about you. So I said, who could be talking about me? Where? And then before the end of the day, we had over 200 people join the Telegram community. Over 200. It has never happened before. And I was forced to say, I want to know what's happening. So I went to the Telegram community and I said, please, where are all of you coming from? And what did you hear? Because I've never had so many people come to this group before. And a young man in the group said, I put up the group link on my status. And then he shared with me what he put on his WhatsApp status, telling people how they needed to join the group and get clarity from the group. And then I thanked him for sharing. But then after talking with him, it really humbled me. I said, God, is this how you work? When I was distracted from this thing, you sent positive energy towards it. Because for a long time I'd not been to the group. I was asleep to the group. And because I was asleep to the group, life sent its positivity to the group, its energy, its replenishment to the group. And then somebody said, oh, you know what? Join this group. And I got the highest influx ever. And it took my mind back to times when I would try to get people to join the group. I'll put it on my WhatsApp. I'll put it on my Facebook. I'll put it on Twitter. I'll put it everywhere. But at best, I will get about 10, 15 people join. I'll talk to a community of how many people? And I'll talk. And I'll share value with them. And I'll say, this is an opportunity for people to join my Telegram group. And I'll share the link. And there will never be more than 10, 15, maybe 20 at best. Never up to 200. 200 came at a point when my mind wasn't there. Because a lot of times when my mind is there, I'm thinking, how? What should I say to convince people? How will I get them to join? When would they join? Some of you need to take your mind off things. You need to stop trying to be in control. You need to stop pushing. Life is beautiful. Life is giving. Life supplies more than it takes. But too many cooks spoil the broth. Your hands are too many for the good thing you want life to serve you. We need very light touch for things to happen in life. I've said it before and I say it again. My wife, one of the best gifts I've had in life. But then it was when I surrendered effort. It came to me when I need to get a girlfriend, I need to get somebody, I need to get a wife. I got someone who wasn't the best fit for me. I'll never get tired of saying it because it taught me a lot. Somebody here needs to listen. Once you start doing too much, it is no longer a blessing. You start kill the blessing. It is very counterintuitive to the culture that we have been taught. But most of us, what you need in your life is rest. So I tell you once again, it's not about positive confession. It's about passive positivity. Be positive enough to let go. Be positive enough to take your attention off it. Stay in a state of conscious sleep. Conscious sleep. And watch life bless you. And when I say life, I don't mean God. Because there's no life without God. Life is God. And we must learn to rest in God. We must learn to rest. Good things happen to us. Those things you make happen will always fall to average. When you become the orchestrator, it can never be the best. But when you are the receiver, when you are the victim, it will overwhelm you. I can guarantee you this. Someone needs to know this. Someone needs to listen to this. Someone needs to apply this. My name is Tola T.A. Alabi, and this is the TA Podcast.